I do not know what to make of Black Ops 1. I just can't work out if this is a dumb game pretending to be smart or a smart game pretending to be dumb. It's like if Christopher Nolan directed Fast and Furious. It shouldn't work, but it absolutely does. Most of the game is told through the eyes of Alex Mason, a CIA operative that Forrest Gumps his way through the Cold War. Like Forrest Gump sits on his bench and he's like, me and my friend Bubba started the Bubba Gump Shrimp Company. Then Jenny got AIDS. And it's the same thing here. Alex Mason is like, well, me and Woods was out in Cuba trying to put a stop to this fella named Castro. But he must have been the hide and seek champion because every time we'd try and get him, it would always be another body double. And that's the baseline this game sets, by the way. Killing Castro is before the 15-minute mark. Anyway, you run away from Castro's plantation house, and you rappel down to the airfield in the goofiest way possible. We then get to a flaw in a lot of older shooters, because we're then told to just book it to an escape plane on the other side of the airfield. But you have limited sprint in this game, so you're just getting absolutely pelted by explosions and bullets, and peak CIA operative Alex Mason just says, no, I couldn't possibly run any faster. But you get to the plane, you do the on-rails turret section, and Alex Mason sacrifices himself to let the others get away. He's then captured by the real Castro, who's like, what is this, some kind of Bay of Pigs? He then hands Mason over to a Russian general called Dragovich, who sends him off to a gulag. That's where you meet Viktor Reznov, a World War II veteran who fought all the way from Stalingrad to Berlin. Despite being a war hero, Reznov had spent the last 18 years in the gulag, and lucky for Mason, he found a way to break out. And honestly, what an inspired mission. It's just the perfect combination of 2 decades of planning squeezed into a tight 20-minute section. He somehow figures out how to coordinate the whole prison camp into an insane, daring escape, and you get to be his long-lost puzzle piece. And each step of the plan is just an excuse to do something really cool. I've said before that the mark of a great shooter mission is variety, and the developers don't let you go 2 fucking minutes before ushering you to the next fun set piece. Just off the top of my head, there's 3 Call of Duty games where the best mission is set in a Russian gulag. For whatever reason, the devs just lock the fuck in whenever they see an old Russian labor camp. And keep in mind, the Vorkuta Goolag was a real thing, and it operated until 1962, a year before the events we see in game. And similarly to the game, there was even an uprising in the camp in 1952, where guards fired into a crowd of striking prisoners. I couldn't find any evidence of prisoners wielding miniguns or harpooning a helicopter, but I choose to believe that happened. But whatever, Mason escapes and Viktor Reznov stays behind to keep him safe. What a good fella. Anyway, despite spending 2 years eating nothing but moldy bread at the arse end of the world, Mason lands back in the United States within a few weeks. The US government then says, welcome home, healthy and well-adjusted war veteran. Would you like to immediately go back to the Soviet Union? I just love it how less than a month after escaping the Gulag, Mason is sent to the Pentagon to meet JFK. And spoilers, I guess, but the Russians tried to brainwash Mason into killing the president. And the meeting with JFK could have just been an email. He just tells you, hurrah, go kill this guy you wanted to kill anyway. This mission also takes place 12 days before Kennedy is assassinated, and it's heavily implied that Alex Mason was the one who pulled it off. And it's not really that much of a stretch. Lee Harvey Oswald was a former Marine just like Alex Mason, and he also spent time in the USSR before the Kennedy assassination. One of my favorite parts of Oswald's defection to the Soviet Union was when he told Russian officials he wanted to be a citizen. They were just like, why the fuck would you want to live here? It's a pretty fun addition that you get to meet Kennedy in this game. And it's a good thing they chose this time in the story, because presidents cop a bit of aura loss for a while.
Mason, what was it like meeting President Lyndon B. Johnson?
It was fine. Till he took his dick out. And Kennedy is so fucking funny in the zombies mode. Like, the Pentagon is being overwhelmed, and he's just like, oh no, zombies. So in the next mission, the CIA sends Mason to kill Dragovich and sabotage the Russian space program. The first thing you do is kill a pair of soldiers and then put on their uniforms. I had the idea of trying to count the number of war crimes in this game, but when you're working for the CIA, I just figured it's going to take too much time. They then have to speak to other Russian soldiers, which for an actual CIA agent is really fucking risky. It's extremely difficult to learn to speak another language without an accent, and agencies like the CIA usually just recruit locals to get around this problem. I mean, the Russians didn't have KGB spies like, "Hello, American comrade. Did you see the latest James Bond movie film? I am a fan number 1 of Pussy Galore. Anyway, you know state secrets, yes? But whatever, you get away with it for a few minutes until shit hits the fan entirely. That's when you whip out an enormous explosive crossbow that you've somehow managed to bluff past a base of soldiers. I tried to find any evidence that crossbows were used during the Cold War, and unfortunately, I came up short. Not even Jonathan Ferguson, keeper of firearms and artillery at the Royal Armouries Museum in the UK, had covered it. Basically, it's possible to mount explosives to a crossbow, but you could also just use an underbarrel grenade launcher. But fuck it, an explosive crossbow is so much cooler. But you rescue your inside man, you blow up a Russian rocket mid-flight, and you kill a bunch of scientists along the way. And the game even addresses that. Woods is like, don't worry, mate, they're Nazi scientists. You can just shoot them. You know, something I didn't expect from a game made in 2010 were enemies who were this reactive. Like all over the place, you got enemies who are rolling and dodging and peeking and panicking. Apparently they got a former Spetsnaz guy to come in and show the devs how they operated, and rolling to cover was just something they were taught to do. At one point in the game, I even saw a Russian soldier pull a pin on himself while he was bleeding out. And honestly, it kind of sucks, because all these years later I thought we'd have soldiers tossing mags to each other or dragging the wounded to cover, but that kind of behavior is still super rare in modern shooters. Why is that? At the end of the mission, we're told that Dragovich, the main bad guy, is killed off-screen in the 4th mission. We don't believe that, and neither does Mason, so he spends the next 5 years trying to hunt him down. The next mission opens on the 21st of January 1968 in the Khe Sanh military base in Vietnam, which just so happens to be the day it gets attacked. Fortunate Son is also playing on the radio, but that didn't come out until 1969. But fuck it, this is Mason's recollection of events. He's allowed to remember it that way. The whole mission is just to survive the attack from the North Vietnamese army. I think Call of Duty might be one of the most effective pieces of American propaganda ever produced, because not only is it incredibly fun, but it often portrays America's enemies as an almost otherworldly, faceless horde. And to be fair, Vietnam today also does the same shit. I traveled to Vietnam last year and got a tour of a war museum, and while you do get to see a bunch of fucked up shit like the effects of napalm and Agent Orange, you could also tell they were throwing in a bit of their own fan fiction. No shit, my tour guide was talking about honest-to-God magic. And although it wasn't an accurate retelling of events, I liked it a lot more. Anyway, during the Battle of Khe Sanh, General William Westmoreland suggested the use of a nuclear bomb. However, Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara, who we actually meet in-game, disagreed with him. Not on moral grounds or anything, he just thought the terrain was kinda shit for it. But Mason and the fellas save the day, and they're sent over to Way City. Their mission is to fight their way through the thick of the Tet Offensive and extract an important Soviet defector. For a lot of the mission, you're able to use the Spaz-12 with incendiary rounds, and I fully expected this to be a war crime, but I couldn't find anything that bans Dragon's Breath rounds in combat. You could argue that it causes unnecessary suffering, which would come under the Geneva Convention, but there's nothing specifically prohibiting it. Apparently it's just because militaries don't see the value in incendiary rounds. I mean, it makes sense because they're not accurate, they give away your position, they're not necessarily more effective than any other type of ammo, and fire doesn't discriminate. It's cool in game, but there's a good reason these didn't take off. So you fight your way through a bunch of buildings and find out that Reznov is the defector. He then says, Dragovich has so much influence in Russia that not even the Kremlin can contain him. This is a reference to Modern Warfare 2, which came out the previous year, and has the exact same plot point. The rest of the mission is fighting through streets with Huey gunship air support. Huey, why'd you turn yourself into an helicopter? We gotta kill Homelander. After we get to the evac, we're told the intel contains a secret weapon called Nova 6, and that it was worked on by an English chemical engineer called Dr. Clark. Basically, after the McCarthy witch hunt started, communists like Clark couldn't get research funding, so he fucked off to the Soviet Union to get work. But after figuring out he was working on a chemical weapon, Clark had to go into hiding to avoid getting JFK'd. The CIA eventually tracked Clark to Hong Kong's Kowloon City, which all things considered is a perfect place to hide. Kowloon City was a tiny enclave within Hong Kong which neither Britain or China wanted to govern. The city was effectively run by triads, had absolutely zero regulation, and would end up having a population density of 1.3 million residents per square kilometer. In fact, the least realistic thing about this mission is the sheer lack of people running around. This city block had more people living in it than the population of Liechtenstein, but we barely see any of them. By the end of the mission, Dr. Clark is shot in the head, and just like the real Kowloon City, he sadly becomes a distant memory. Ah well, at least the rest of Hong Kong is still a thriving democratic country. But admittedly, it's been a while since I checked. The next mission is a Reznov flashback to 1945, just months after the end of the Second World War. The Russians had been hunting down the last few pockets of Nazi soldiers, which took them all the way to the Arctic Circle. The mission is to capture Nazi scientist Frederick Steiner, who initially created the Nova 6 nerve agent. I gotta say, gunning down waves of Nazis sure is a lot of fun. It's just a nice change of pace from lighting Vietnamese farmers on fire. It kind of just heals the soul, you know? I didn't know this while playing, but the cast for this game is actually pretty stacked. Gary Oldman plays Reznov, Ed Harris is Hudson, and Bowman is played by fucking Ice Cube. And full props to Sam Worthington because he acts his fucking heart out as Alex Mason.
The world is on the fucking brink of war!
Whose war? Who the fuck are you anyway?
So the Russians fight their way to the Nova 6, and Dragovich says, "Despite having dozens of Nazi prisoners, I've decided to test this terrible weapon on Reznov and Dmitri, the heroes of Berlin." And I'm not kidding, because canonically, Reznov and Dmitri are the ones who planted the Soviet flag at the Reichstag. But Dmitri is killed by the gas, and Reznov is saved because the British show up to get control of the Nova 6. Reznov figures that the world is probably better off without Nova 6 at all, and decides to just blow the place to Kingdom Come. I gotta say, it's kinda weird fighting the British, because they all yell out to each other, and I can understand what they're saying. I know for a fact that there's a weirdly high number of Germans who watch this channel, so I gotta know. Is it weird for you guys too? Like when you play games set in World War II, are you like, "Oh no, I shot Great Uncle Hans"? Mission 9 is more Vietnam War shit. You're sneaking through the jungle, swimming through rivers, and crawling through tunnels. We also meet Richard Hammond. There isn't much to say about this mission. The devs wanted to make a Vietnam Commando level, and this one covers all the greatest hits. I did come across a glitch in the tunnels, so I had to fight the Void people. But we get more intel with Reznov and get the fuck out. Mission 10 is probably the most memorable because the first half is spent speeding down a river while Sympathy for the Devil plays over the speakers. I gotta say, playing a song about the history of human atrocities from the perspective of the devil kinda hits different from what I remembered. The rest of the mission is more shooty bang bang, the Russians show up, and the fellas are captured by Dragovich. By now you could probably tell that Call of Duty stories start with a list of fun scenarios, and the writers just have to weave that into the plot somehow. The next thing on that checklist is to pilot a Lockheed Blackbird, which is such a cool fucking plane. The Blackbird was a reconnaissance aircraft developed for the CIA, and its entire design philosophy was, don't care, can't catch me. Like the standard operating procedure if an enemy locks onto this thing was just to go faster and outrun the missile. Don't care, can't catch me. The actual gameplay is pretty average because all you can do is tell the real army guys where to go. But honestly, that's just kinda how vehicle sections are in this game. They're fine. The CIA's mission is to infiltrate a Soviet base where they suspect Nova 6 is being developed. Honestly, it's a lot of fun. The entire level is constantly trying to find excuses to give you cool shit to do, and it has a lot of those fun scripted moments where your teammates get to show off their own competence. I always appreciate shooters that go to the effort of animating shit that you might not even see. Some devs probably spend 4 days on this 5-second interaction, but I'm glad they did. So you and your CIA buddies fight to the end of the base, and you get a voicemail from Frederick Steiner, the Nazi guy. He's like, "Yeah, Russian sleeper cells are gonna fuck you up, hey. But I'm pretty sure Dragovich is about to kill me, so if you come save me, I'll help you out." I gotta say, Dragovich is such a dog shit manager, bro. Like, he is the world champion of killing his most useful allies for no discernible reason. Meanwhile, Mason and Woods are having a bad time in Laos, and they're forced to play Russian roulette by the Viet Cong. I tried to find any evidence that this kind of thing ever happened, but it seems to be something made up by Hollywood. It seems to have started with the film The Deer Hunter, and it must have been influential because reportedly as many as 25 people died while playing Russian roulette after watching it. But honestly, I think this is such a great scene. It shows how much Mason and Woods trust each other, because as soon as Woods says the next barrel is loaded, there's zero hesitation. They just lock in and fucking send it. Mason and Woods then decide to make their escape by stealing a high-end attack helicopter, which is probably the least realistic thing they ever do. Even a trained pilot would struggle to jump into a foreign helicopter and just take off, but Mason and Woods are built different, I guess. The high-end helicopter wasn't even introduced for another 4 years after this scene is set, but it gets a lot less fun if everything has to be historically accurate. Like, the Spaz 12 wouldn't have been around for another 12 years by the end of this game, but it's fun, so who gives a shit? It does kind of make you wonder how history might compress our own time period. Like, when films depict the 2003 Iraq War 100 years from now, who's to say they won't throw in quadcopter drones blasting Songs by the Weeknd? And you might think that would be ridiculous, but there's underbarrel flamethrowers in this same mission, so who's to say how it will be depicted? I suspect people from today will be portrayed as absolute fucking morons, and future generations will be absolutely justified in doing so. Anyway, Woods and Mason find Dragovich's number 2, Woods seemingly sacrifices himself to save Mason, and Reznov is also there for some reason. After finding some more intel, Mason and Reznov make their way to Rebirth Island, a secret Russian research base which is home to Frederick Steiner. The location seems to be based off of Vozrozdenya Island in modern-day Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan. It was designed to be a place super out of the way, where the Soviet Union could make chemical weapons and then not dispose of them properly. So Mason and Reznov sneak in, they shoot a bunch of people, and they finally make their way to Frederick Steiner. Reznov then shoots him in the head, which makes the CIA very upset. You see, 20 minutes earlier, the CIA sent a team to extract Steiner, because he knows how to stop the Russian sleeper agents from wiping out the United States. Unfortunately, that means enduring another vehicle section with the screen shake set to 6 billion. Like, you're just trying to shoot a mounted gun and your entire character is like... So you get to Steiner 5 seconds before he's shot in the head, and you finally learn that Reznov isn't there at all. It's all in Mason's head. It turns out that when the Russians captured Mason the first time, they tried to brainwash him to kill the president. But because Mason is just built different, he had a high resistance to the brainwashing. For one reason or another, Viktor Reznov was able to hijack the process and implant his own goal within Mason's brain: to kill the 3 men who had betrayed him. Reznov had died trying to escape the Gulag, and Mason had just been imagining him the whole time. Post-Gulag Reznov was just how the brainwashing had manifested itself. That's why when you get to Frederick Steiner, Reznov is like,
Kill him now.
Anyway, the next 10 minutes is just Mason stumbling through hallways and remembering stuff. It turns out the numbers he sees all game are a subconscious code implanted into Russian sleeper agents. It's a code that lets them decipher their instructions. Mason then says, yep, I now know where their broadcast station is. Let's go kill them. It's pretty funny that as soon as Mason can stretch his legs and walk around, he gives the CIA exactly what they need. This is a fun reference to the CIA's failed torture program. The game's final mission opens up in the Gulf of Mexico, and for those watching in the future, it was officially called Gulf of America within the United States for a few years. No one took it seriously. We truly do live in silly times. The start of the mission is more vehicle combat stuff, which, as a reminder, isn't that good in this game. It's not even their fault though, it's just because the ones in Modern Warfare 2 were so peak. I also didn't mention this before, but another creative liberty in this campaign was the use of red dot sights on weapons. The first red dots weren't even invented until the mid-70s, and even then, they didn't become standard for US troops until the 2000s rolled around. But fuck it, it's the end of the world and the CIA had a blank check at this point. After all, if they don't invent cool futuristic gun accessories, then all those people who went without healthcare died for nothing. So after fighting through the cargo ship, the CIA discovers that the real broadcast station is at the bottom of the ocean. The plan is to wipe out the US with Nova 6 and then use the underwater submarine base as a launching point for the invasion. All things considered, this is a pretty cool concept. I'm not a water scientist, so I don't know how realistic it is, but it's probably easier than explaining a Nazi moon base. Anyway, the team fight their way through the underwater base, nearly get blown up about 6 times, and yo, is that an Ark Raiders reference? Mason then has a final confrontation with Dragovich, which is mostly just punching him a few times. He and Hudson then somehow swim their way to the surface. I gotta say, the final shot in this game might just be the single most American scene in any form of media. It's just perfect.
Mason! It is over. We won.
For now.
Black Ops is kind of like the high art shit you see in art galleries, because although you don't fully understand it, there's nothing quite like it. And just like a banana taped to a wall selling for $6 million, sometimes you can't quite know if Black Ops is too smart for its own good or too stupid to ever warrant deeper analysis. Anyway, Black Ops 2 is somehow even crazier, so here's a link to that if you want to watch it too. Until next time, have a fucking good one.